You know, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to this meeting of Community Select Committee. I'm Councillor Rachel Quinn, Chair of this committee. I would like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet via the Council's website and will be capable of repeated viewing. The images and sound recording may be used for training purposes within the Council. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, can everyone please keep to the following guidelines for speaking? Councillors should only use the raise your hand or chat functions to request to speak. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chair. Please switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking, and remember to set your mobile phone to silent for the duration of the meeting. Any views expressed by any speaker in this meeting are the speaker's own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the Council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to be streamed live 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in transmitting live. I will now confirm the names of the remaining members of this committee. Councillor Benzer, Councillor Collins, Councillor Dupee, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Gruby, Councillor Hacking, Councillor Hall, Councillor Inman, Councillor Lomax, Councillor Mackie and Councillor Sizeland. And we'll go to the agenda. Part one, we have got apologies for absence. Kerry, we've got Councillor Gardner. I can't hear you, Kerry. Is it just me or?
Can't hear you also, Chair.
Yeah. Kerry, we can't hear you, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, we have apologies from councillors Dupee, Gardner and Collins, and we have substitutes of councillors Scott and Farrell.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, on to agenda item 2, to receive disclosures of interest on any matters before the committee. Any disposable pecuniary interests or other interests. If you could just raise your hand if you've got any. Councillor Gruby.
Yeah, I'll declare another interest, and I would also take advice from Mark, who I can see is also on the call. I'm obviously a Derbyshire County Councillor as well as a Borough Councillor, and this only refers to part 2 where you're looking at the care homes, etc. I can't see any reason why I shouldn't remain in the meeting, and I'm happy to answer questions along with everybody else on the committee. However, if Mark or yourself, Rachel, feel differently about that, I'm happy to leave the meeting at your request.
Mark, I'll defer to you first of all.
No, I think that's fine, Councillor Gruby. You're not a member of the executive, are you, of the County Council, so you won't be making the decision at the county in respect of the matters under consultation?
No, we do get to vote in the chamber eventually, though.
Would it be a council decision?
Well, yes, it should, I think, be taken in the council chamber at full council eventually, if it does come down to closure. At the moment, it's still out for consultation, of course, and nothing's been decided. Yeah.
Well, I still think it's still at consultation stage, isn't it? And it would be important for the council to respond. I don't think you'd have any other pecuniary interest around it, so it would be another interest. So yeah, I think you could declare and remain.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rachel. Yeah.
I think it might be useful as well to get that perspective. Yeah. So good. Yes, Damien.
Just to ditto that, I'm a county councillor, not a committee member, but declare it as another interest then as a county councillor on that when we get to that item on the agenda.
Thank you, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, any matters, agenda item 3, any matters referred to under the procedure, can't speak tonight. I don't believe there are any.
No, Chair.
No, okay. Could we go to the minutes of the previous meeting, agenda item 4, that are on pages 3 to 8? Now, I'm going to ask if anyone's got any matters arising, but I would just like to pick up a couple of things. First of all, on the clear, hold, build and the setting up of a working group, can I ask where we are with that at the moment, please? Anthony, is that appropriate for you?
Chair, I think we're almost there in terms of having all the volunteers. I think I may need to just refresh my notes and possibly arm twist a further volunteer of the Labour group for that working group. But there has been some updates to the process that I think will probably be useful to come back to the whole committee anyway, sort of the next time you meet. But we'll look at getting a meeting of the working group in between just to update any specifics.
So before the next meeting of community. Okay.
Yes, Chair. There's been a couple of updates. I bet most people will have seen the newspaper coverage of some of them, but officers have obviously been working to try and get the agreement in place in terms of trying to take the action plan forward, and there's been a need to make some changes to that process, just in terms of there's been perhaps a little sluggishness in terms of getting some of our partners signed up, but I think we can get an update on that both to the working group and then to the next committee at the appropriate point.
Okay, thanks. And that can be mentioned when we get onto the work programme as well. Jean.
Sorry, I just wondered, am I allowed on that working group as it's Buxton Central?
Chair, the members of scrutiny rather than members of the executive. Members of the executive are welcome to attend, subject to the wishes or otherwise of the chair, but the membership should be just from the scrutiny side of things.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the arm twisting probably is outside of this meeting, so we'll do that elsewhere. I was also going to pick up on page 5. There are a couple of items for the work programme that haven't yet been slotted in. So when we're discussing the work programme, can we also be aware of those, please? Anyone else got any points to raise from the minutes, please? No, in which case, could I just raise your hand for this? Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thanks, Kath. Councillor Sizeland, and thanks, Paige. Councillor Hacking, thank you very much. Okay, can we now move on to the report, which is separate to the main agenda pack, working with the voluntary, community and social enterprise sector. Anthony, are you introducing
Chair,
this?
you've got a hand up.
Oh,
from
sorry.
Councillor Lomax.
Councillor Lomax,
no,
sorry.
it's me desperately trying to get my hand down.
Sorry. Okay. Anthony, would you like to take us through, please?
Thanks, Chair. I think first, just by way of introduction, if I can just sort of ask for members of the committee sort of thanks to both David Smith and Kim Gilmore in terms of putting the report together. We've got quite a concise overview of sort of the voluntary and community sector in terms of the parts of it that are supported particularly by us in the borough, but also some wider information given some of the other issues that are taking place at the moment. In terms of the report that's before you this evening, there's a general introduction in terms of the voluntary and community sector. There's then specific information around some of the elements that we're funding as a council and what sort of bang for our buck we're getting for that in terms of specific services that some of those groups are providing for us. We've also got some information looking at how we can sort of improve and, to a certain extent, both focus but also make sure that we're playing our part in terms of that support and development, in terms of sort of working with the voluntary sector and how we can sort of try and both formalise some elements of that, but also put in place measures to improve that. I mean, to a certain extent, whilst I'd love to be coming to you today and saying we'll also have we've also got another big bag of cash sort of snatched away under the table or something like that, I'm not going to be able to do that. But there is a hope that in terms of some of the ways that the voluntary sector is currently working across the High Peak, I'm hopeful that we can try and work with some of those particularly some of the key organisations such as the Bureau Connects, New Mills Volunteer Centre and High Peak CVS, to look at how we may be able to see if there are just some little tricks that we can try and do to try and make sure all of us are getting our best sort of bang for our buck. There's also information around the progress of the High Peak Community Lottery that was established as a way to try and sort of help further support some of these organisations across the borough. In terms of that, we as members may or may not recall, aside from the sort of the prizes and the individual funding that goes to the organisations that are involved with it, it also leaves us with a pot of money to both pay for the operating costs that we need to do in terms of supporting the community lottery, but also then leaves us a pot of money that we can look at how we can use to sort of help support and develop the voluntary and community sector across the borough. And then a final bit, which we're particularly looking for members' sort of feedback on, is there's currently a Derbyshire County Council consultation looking into funding changes from funding that is given by the County Council to a number of these organisations. We're obviously wanting to seek members of the committee's view on the impact members may feel that that's likely to have. I'm sure some of you may have seen recent emailing from various parts of the voluntary and community sector that are raising concern over what those potential changes mean. But aside from that, Chair, happy for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Do we have any questions or comments? Jill.
Yeah, thanks. This is a question about insurance, Anthony. Recently, myself and 3 other residents in Hayfield had walk leader training, which was delivered as part of the Move More agenda. Now, on the slides, there was, it kind of implied that walk leaders would be covered under the council's insurance. Now, it turns out that this is not the case. And so we're probably going to have to look to being covered by the New Mills Volunteer Centre insurance. But I just wanted to know what the policy was on insuring volunteers who, it's quite a low risk activity in a sense, but it's actually walking children to school because we're doing the walking bus to Hayfield Primary School. So I know a couple of the members of the group were quite relieved when they saw it was in the slides and disappointed when we were told actually it's not happening. So what is the council's policy on ensuring volunteers that they might have kind of recruited through one of their strategies?
I suspect with this, I'll probably need to refer on to sort of David or Mark, but it is one of those issues that sort of come up on a couple of occasions. Generally, sort of our setup is that we wouldn't normally be responsible for sort of ensuring volunteers for activities that are sort of taking part where we've been involved in the training of them. But it is an issue that does occasionally come up for sort of a number of sort of this type of related activity. So, for example, one of the queries that we've had and that I know Councillor Baker and Councillor Greenhouse are looking at, is there potential for, can we sort of try and support our Friends of Park groups in some way that have a similar sort of issue? They're quite often looking at putting events on in our parks, but because of the way the setup currently works, they have to get their own insurance to make sure we're covered for those. But if I could pass on to our experts for the expert guidance.
Okay, Mark, very quickly.
Well, I don't know if David knows around the CVS policy, whether is there a block policy through the CVS, David, for affiliated organisations?
I'm not sure. I'd have to follow that up for you. But I think what Anthony said was, a good overview of our position, which is largely that we don't provide the insurance. It's not our activity. We have little control over who's been employed or who's volunteering and what they do. But certainly I'll pick up the CVS bit.
Otherwise, obviously, the council's insurance is for officers of the council and direct activities of the council. Otherwise, there isn't an adequate insurable risk. But it's a really good point. We'll look into it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that. Okay, moving on. Councillor Hacking. Age.
Hi, yeah. I have more of a observation and comment than a specific question regarding the community grant fund and how we do that. And most of it is around deliverables and making sure that we are actually being effective in getting those deliverables in terms of I know there's a lot of competition for funding, and I think when there is competitions for funding and it gets competitive, that well, there's an element of business that comes into that at that point because of the competition. And I just really want to be mindful that the right people are getting the money to make not just cost effective, but to make sure that what the community needs is getting. And in terms of, because of competition for the funding, that people aren't just tick boxing exercises and making a problem worse in order to get the funding. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, I think so.
To elaborate a bit more on what I mean, because I'm happy to do that.
It does make sense, and I think that a lot of what this report is trying to do is actually to go through the contribution of the various voluntary groups and to show how they're useful and how they merit the funding. But that is something, you're quite right, we do need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. David, do you want to come in on that? You look keen and eager.
No, not particularly. I think the difficulty is that well, the voluntary sector organisations that have grown up generally in response to a problem, so they or an interest or a particular desire or need to help a certain sector, whether it's geographically or whatever. So largely the role of the council is to support that activity. In terms of our contributions, they are relatively small in terms of the overall budgets of these organisations, and what we tend to provide the funding to is to the core delivery, so to help to support the ongoing costs, the running costs, etc. So I think that's quite critical to these organisations. They find it easier sometimes to get funding to deliver a certain project, but obviously they need an organisational capacity to do that. I think the other bit that we're wary of is striking the right balance between being overly prescriptive and also putting too much burden on people in terms of evaluations and proving outcomes, etc. I'm quite happy to have a conversation about that, because I think it is about striking that right balance, because I'm also conscious that it is public money that we are spending, and we need to reassure you reassure ourselves, I suppose, as a council that that money is being used appropriately, which is why one of the things that we've done is introduce the new SLAs. And as part of that, there is a commitment for them to put on some sort of event, open day, that we would then encourage councillors to attend, so we can have a look at what they're actually delivering. But yeah, as a general point, completely agree with you, Councillor Hacking.
Okay, thanks, David. And of course, these groups do come up to community, and they do give presentations explaining their work as well. So that's another opportunity for scrutiny. Councillor Inman.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just a couple of points to make. in the documents, there's a reference to £5,000 from the High Peak Lottery Fund being used to fund some of the future losses of Derbyshire discretionary grants. I just wanted to ask, really, how much of a black hole that would fill, and because it looks to me like it wouldn't cover very much of it. So what sort of plans are there for the loss of those discretionary grants, which seem quite substantial?
Yeah, if I start us off and David can come in. I mean, the table that's detailed within the report from the section starting from 8.10 onwards. That's obviously, you'll be able to tot it up yourself, but it's obviously significantly more than what the pot is that we've got available. Yeah. Essentially, what we, as part of this process of reviewing the organisations, we are starting to look into and we've had discussions with most of the organisations around what would be the impact if they lost the funding from the county council, and we're still within that process at the moment. Obviously, it's still an open consultation at the moment, so we don't know what the end outcome of that consultation is going to be, but we are starting to try and see is there work with some of those organisations on alternative sources of funding, because whilst I'd love to be able to say, yeah, we've got the money sat in a budget somewhere and be able to, that's not the, and you'll see from the figures that we're able to offer the organisations at the moment, in a lot of cases they're a lot smaller figures, but they are opposed to the funding pots. They are unring fenced, so the organisations can use them as required. So essentially, it's a bit of a watching brief at the moment. We're aware of the consultation. We're obviously urging folk to respond to the consultation like the organisations are, and we as a council, based on comments that we received from yourselves this evening and subsequent to that, in the run up to sort of the consultation going, we will make a response as a council to that. Yeah. But in terms of what the impact will be, we have to wait and see once they finish the consultation, and then we'll have to take it from there.
Okay, thank you. The second question was around, and David, you've touched on it before. I do generally welcome the points made about having more sort of officer involvement in how we distribute or award money to groups. I wanted to make a particular point around the Councillor Initiative Fund. The positives of that is that as a councillor, you feel a lot of freedom to sort of award things to organisations that you think deserve it, I suppose. But then one of the negatives is that it can be, not always, but it can be the same groups who apply for these councillor initiative funds year on year. So I do welcome, I just don't know what it would look like, how we would work more with officers in terms of awarding those funds. So I wondered if you'd had any more points to add on that. And also I wouldn't like to throw away the freedom of awarding the money if it meant I was having to take on a lot more bureaucratic measurement sort of paperwork and all the rest of it, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. I think the amount of money. I think the way that I would see it, and obviously would welcome any comments, is that if members want some assistance in terms of what sort of organisations are in the area, and if anybody who is looking for funding, particularly experiencing problems, that we could have that conversation and help members in that way. But certainly, I think the fund is there for you as members to support the organisations that you want in your area, and we wouldn't want to get in the way of that. So we'd want to be helpful, but take away any control or direct you in any particular direction unless you want some advice.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just pick up on that? Because it seems like a really good point. I know that people do want that freedom. So dog just appeared from nowhere. People do want that freedom, but it might be a really good idea if we had a directory of organisations. So sometimes councillors do struggle with finding organisations, and if we had that centrally, it might help organisations that can't get funding, and also encourage councillors to get involved, but still give them the freedom to award the money where they wish. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's some of the intentions around it, and quite often as well, because of the work that officers, particularly within Dave's team, are doing, they'll quite often sometimes come across either new organisations or organisations that are looking for that little bit of funding. And in some cases, it's not necessarily that they're not a local organisation. Some of them can be ones that are operating, across a particular town or a particular patch, and they just might not necessarily have either the details, the knowledge, or the skills to sort of get in touch with councillors from that relevant area. So in some cases, I know, for example, one of the ones that's been looked at within Glossopdale at the moment, there's a couple of councillors that are looking at, can they provide some support around the age concern group? And to a certain extent, they're like a long time existing one, and there's quite a few councillors that are aware of them. But if you were a newer organisation, you might not have that sort of knowledge to be able to sort of reach out and contact folk to be able to try and get that support. And that's something that we're hoping we could be able to address in the future.
Yeah, which is a really good idea. Okay, right. So firstly, we do need comments because of the feedback to the consultation. So would it be useful, Anthony, if members of the committee had comments that they want to make to go forward to that consultation?
Chair, yeah, I mean, it'd be helpful if they've got the comments while we're on the meeting this evening, but if not, if folk could make sure that they could feed them through to David and the team, and we can make sure that we can respond then on behalf of the council. I mean, to a certain extent, it's similar with the consultation item that's on later on the agenda in the part 2 section. But particularly if they've got comments around sort of any of the organisations that are involved with this. And I know some of the organisations themselves are now starting to reach out to local members to sort of give them sort of some of the information on impacts that they're expecting to feel if the consultation does go one way.
Just very briefly, are those comments coming through to David or to you, or if people are going to send them through?
Either, Chair, and we'll make sure before the consultation replies goes off, if we can sort of round robin it or IED it, depending on the timing, to yourself and the Vice Chair before it goes off.
That's brilliant. Okay, thank you. Damien.
Thanks, Chair. As many people might know or may not know, I've previously worked at the Bureau, and I know the difference that the Bureau and all the organisations in there make, and actually led a campaign to stave off some cuts 2 years ago. I would just say, in general terms, for our council responses, that whilst I think most people understand the extreme position that local government is under and the county council, that many of the plans, strategic plans, things that the county council wants to achieve rely on the voluntary sector, and that it's grossly disproportionate to remove all funding. So there is a level of proportionality that I think the voluntary sector is growing up to understand that there may be a reduction, but to remove the entirety of it feels like a cliff edge, and whatever other euphemism you want to use, pulling the rug from underneath the voluntary sector, because the voluntary sector, in times of trouble, if you take COVID, for instance, where the initial sort of local authority response was very slow and difficult, I think, again, first-hand experience working at the Bureau at that time, there was almost 3-4 weeks where it felt like the voluntary sector was really, because of that's how nimble and how close to communities the voluntary sector is. So I don't think anyone in politics or otherwise, would like to see reduction to the voluntary sector. I think all of those organisations do wonderful things, but I think the voluntary sector is very grown up. It delivers, whether when local government and other funders have want metrics, want things to be delivered, the voluntary sector rises to the challenge, delivers it and more, and adds a lot of value into the boot. So I would just say, I think in our council's response, it needs to be about the proportionality of removing all funding, understanding the situation the county council's in, but it's unusual, and in many other local authorities, although there has been reductions, it doesn't appear to be the same approach of slashing and burning as it feels to me anyway. But I just felt remiss if I didn't state this at this committee, because it's something I feel very strongly about, and I see the benefit of all these organisations day to day as a councillor of over 10 years now, and as someone that's worked with volunteers in these organisations and professionally as well. So thanks for your indulgence, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Heartfelt. It occurs to me a huge issue is that these cuts are probably going to end up costing more, with the impact on health and social care, mental health, etc. I think that is going to be a big loss. Does anyone want to make a comment now, or are obviously people can comment in writing when they've had time to go away and reflect? Paige.
I was just going to say that in some ways having a review of how they work and is a good thing, because I think there are lots of gaps in the services that voluntary organisations can offer, and there's a lot of unanswered questions about how best to serve people. And one of the things that I would really like to see more of is, in terms of, you say mental health, is encouraging groups that support the autonomy that supports mental health, like, peer support, and actually like people who have been through the issues they want to help with and come out the other side, who have that experience to really empathise with someone who is in a vulnerable position, and actually saying, be careful of like labelling someone with that vulnerability in order to get support. And I just have someone who genuinely understands it, who isn't labelling them, who's actually able to say, you are able to come out the other side of this. I think, because I've done it. And I think that's so important that we're making sure that the voluntary organisations are supporting that sort of support, because otherwise, especially in politically, if someone's offering support, then you're putting them in a position of power over someone else with the safeguarding and all the rest of it. And I just think when someone is that vulnerable, and they need to know that they are actually being listened to and they are actually being understood, and that by actually getting this support, going to this organisation, that they will be better and not worse off, and that they're actually able to accept and want that support. So yeah, I think that's where it needs to go, and I think we need to encourage people who are getting better or who are on a path to resilience to help other people gain that same resilience.
Okay, thanks, Paige. I'm sure that the strategy will enable us to do that. Okay, moving on, because we've got quite a lot. There are a huge number of recommendations on page 3 to page 4. I think we will take them all together. I'm presuming that everyone has read them. So the executive notes the feedback from organisations. We've noted that the County Council is consulting on proposals, and we know that we are looking at a response to that. Please note 2.3 of the recommendations. The council uses the money raised from the High Peak Community Lottery and held in the Central Fund to promote and support the work of the VCSE sector, after fees for the gambling licence, etc. That we consult with the sector about developing an agreement between groups and the council, which relates to some of the points that have been made. The council works with the sector and other partners to identify how the work of the sector can be better publicly acknowledged and promoted, and reviews the community support grant. So, Godfrey. Hello?
Have you got me now?
Yes, got you now.
God. I just wanted to return to I was waiting till the end. I just want to return to this because this campaign is a very difficult one. We all know why the County Council is doing what it's doing. It's unlikely to cut all grants, but the grants that it will cut will be absolutely swinging. And to send a letter ourselves would probably have a small, if any, impact. And I just wanted to suggest to Anthony that maybe the best way of tackling this, because it covers the whole of the population of the county, is trying to do something in concert with the other local authorities. So if, for example, there was a letter that was signed by all leaders saying that this must not happen. And the second thing is simply saying don't do this is not going to have any impact. There needs to be some sort of proposal as to what should happen. The County Council is in a real mess, and it's a mess that's not really of its own making, it's the government's making. And we all know why the County Council is in the mess that it is. But it does seem to me that if we were able to make some constructive suggestion to the County Council from all the local authorities in the county, that would have probably a bigger impact than anything else. I know that the own organisation that I'm chair of, which is Gossipdale Food Bank, has already submitted a response. I doubt whether it will even get read. And I think there's a danger that the pieces of paper that come in from this consultation won't even get weighed. Whereas I think the leaders of the councils could carry some weight in this argument.
Okay, so the consultation closes on the 20th of August. So is that time for that to be organised?
That's a long time.
Okay.
Sorry,
yeah. We can have a look at that. There are quite regular, particularly with sort of the implementation of the new regional mayoralty. There's quite often sort of gatherings of the leaders of the various councils across the county. So we can have a look at how that can be done.
Can we add that as an extra recommendation then?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Do I need to do anything, or can we just add it as an amendment and then take it all as the? Is that all right?
Yeah, I think colleagues in the committee section will come up with the perfected form of wording we need, and we can get that included. Yes, Chair.
Okay, so we'll take all of the recommendations, including the extra one, if that is okay. Could I have a proposer, please? Just a hand is fine. It's gone quiet. Oh, thank you. Oh no, Godfrey, you can't do it. Councillor Sizeland, thank you very much. And could I have another member of the committee if possible, please? Thank you, Peter. Okay, Mark, did you have a comment? Sorry.
I was just going to say that a hand had gone up, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody. So comments can go via email, please. Okay.
Chair, if possible, if we could ask for any comments to come in by the end of July, then if needs be, we can we can double check with the respective organisations if there's any sort of additional supporting details they can add to any comments that we're getting before sending off that reply.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Thanks,
okay,
Chair.
Thank you. Can we move to the next item, which is the Select Committee work programme? Now, we've already had an update. We're going to have an update on the response to Clearhold Build. We are going to have the Banking Hub paper analysis to be put in, and we're going to have AES maintenance of green spaces and communication. Do we have any other comments or things to be added to the work programme?
I think those two items that you've just mentioned, Chair, are already on the work programme, aren't they?
Already on.
The two items that are outstanding are the Police and Crime Commissioner,
yeah,
and a health update. They are yet to go on the work programme, but I'm working on those.
Okay.
To get those slotted in.
Okay, thank you. So the mowing regimes, wider biodiversity, AES. So is the green spaces going to come in the AES annual performance review?
The green spaces, it's not called that on there. It's called Parks Development Update, is it called?
Okay,
sorry,
right,
it's that one. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, any other? We do tend to fill up this work programme and have busy meetings, but I suppose that is good. Okay, any other comments? No, okay. So moving on, any questions referred to the executive member? We don't have any. So can we now go to 8, the exclusion of the press and public? And Kerry, can we stop the recording and can you let me know when we have, so we can move on to part 2, please?